v'imru. Amen. You may be seated. Good Shabbos. So if somebody could bring in the easel and the panel from the hallway, that would be really helpful. Thank you. It is an extreme honor and pleasure to invite up Rivelin Prell, who is going to tell us about this last panel of the series in the Oral History Project.
Shabbat Shalom. Thank you, Rabbi. In 1992, when our family joined Beth Jacob, I often looked around the shul on Shabbat morning and wondered about the stories that seniors in the Kihila brought here. Congregants from Europe, who by their ages I assumed were survivors, families from the former Soviet Union, who likely had minimal, if any, Jewish practices, elders who grew up in the storied first settlement of St. Paul, Jews, and built Sons of Jacob together, and those I knew whose lives were devoted to tzedakah. What led them all to join or create a new conservative synagogue committed to a unique vision of egalitarianism? I often wondered about the person I sat in front of every Shabbat, whose davening was so deep that it elevated mine. What shaped his Judaism? Each of their lives could teach us about the richness and diversity of Jewish cultures and the life course itself. In the fall of 1994, I asked Rabbi Morris Allen if he thought it would be interesting to create a Beth Jacob oral history project with US-wide teens who might want to learn these congregants' stories. They all agreed. I did not envision a formal project of the kind that I had led in the past. What we wanted was to connect teens with older adults to learn their stories. When I held a training session for the US Wires about how to interview people, I began by asking them what questions interested them, which shaped the interviews. They wanted to know what our elders' lives were like when they were their ages, how they spent their time, what they cared about, and about their families and Judaism. I also encouraged them to ask the person they would get to know what they wanted to share about their lives. I do not exaggerate the Hamish quality of this project. In the dinosaur era of tape recorders, more than one student forgot to turn on the recorder or put in the cassette. Still, the US Wires had great stories to tell about a congregant who organized a lending library, charging kids in the neighborhood a few pennies to read books. Others who learned about tzedakah from their bubbies, remembered their Shabbat tables and mother's kitchens, childhoods at Sons of Jacob, their jobs as children, and who later created their own families. They also heard hard stories about surviving Sobibor, family members killed, immigration, and anti-Semitism in St. Paul in Europe. We then turned to adult members to become interviewers to collect even more elder stories. We also recruited Stephen Foldis to photograph many of those who were interviewed because we needed high-quality images. He asked each person or couple how they wanted to pose, which provided our elders one more opportunity to tell their stories on their terms. Our project, Community Memories, the Beth Jacob Oral History Project, is a series of panels of photographs and brief excerpts from the interviews, which were displayed for the first time at the Tikkun Leil Shavua that spring. Our plan was to talk about the project as one session of the Tikkun, honor our elders, and then during cheesecake breaks, we would look at the panels on the back walls of the social hall, where we thought they would remain a few weeks and then be carefully stored in a closet. As Rabbi Allen eloquently said at our Tikkun, we honor our members to mark the generational ties linking us to the unending gift of Torah to the Jewish people. However, the project took on its own anticipated place in the life of the shul. Rabbi Allen and I both noticed that every Shabbat throughout the summer, people gathered at the back wall to look again at the photos and words. Most importantly, the people who appeared in the photos stood with friends, family, or some by themselves, simply looking at their images to see the community's regard and love for them. Subsequently, Rabbi Allen told me that as death inevitably came to these beloved members, some of their families asked to display the panel with their image in the hallway outside of the sanctuary during a funeral. What began as a commitment to tell stories across generations became not only part of the life of Beth Jacob itself, but of the meaning of community and history. With the passage of time, some of those who conducted the interviews became our honored elders. We are grateful to Phyllis Gorn and Beth Friend for consistently urging us to complete this phase of the project by interviewing 5 people who occupied an esteemed place in the Shoal: Bob Perry, Linda Perry, Marvin Pertzik, Larry Sept, and Sue Sept. Today, we honor them with the completion of one more panel. Thank you to Beth and Phyllis, Rabbi Allen and Barbie Levine for interviewing them and learning about the place of Beth Jacob in their lives, as well as lives of service and tzedakah. Thank you to Stephen Foldis and Vicki Itzkowitz for making beautiful photographs of them, and Nat Baer for creating videos of these interviews. Thank you to Stephen Foldis, who created the panel, and Brian Milberg, who worked with Stephen on displaying it. And we are grateful to Mickey Minzberg and Rabbi Tamar for organizing our presentation. Before we invite our congregants to talk briefly about the people we honor, I want to reflect on the context of oral history projects as they became part of the landscape of American and American Jewish history. The first how-to book about Jewish oral histories that I recall was published in 1972 about immigrants in the Pittsburgh Jewish community. It was called By Myself, I'm a Book. What a concept for the time. It affirmed that an ordinary Jew not only had a life that was worth recording and preserving because it was theirs, but that person's experience had something to teach all of us about global forces and life's quotidian events. It was the era when Studs Terkel, whose oral histories of the Great Depression, working men and women, and ordinary World War II soldiers, published in 1974, 1978, and 1985, captured America's attention because they valued the lives of all Americans as they engaged and shaped the great historical moments of their times. The power and importance of everyday lives as makers of history is what our teens and adults have been fortunate to learn through this project. We cannot understand history without accounting for the diverse peoples, their genders, sexualities, and social classes who live and make history. At a moment when the religious, cultural, and racial diversity of this nation is again being challenged by those who claim that the nation belongs to the true Americans, and that does not include us. It is worth remembering that even our small oral history project tells a Jewish and an American story about those who came before us to make the nation and the Jewish people far richer for their presence.
So you can see here the 5 people that were interviewed in the last panel that we'll be installing today. I want to invite up Jeff Schochel, Barbie Levine, Earl Schwartz and Nina Samuels to share a little bit about these 5 people.
Thank you, Rabbi. When asked to introduce my good friend Marvin Pertzik today as part of the Oral History Project, one directive I was given was 2 minutes max. And after the panic, I thought, how do I even begin to condense the extraordinary 95-plus years of Marvin's nurturing and sustaining the Jewish community, not only in the Twin Cities, but across this country, and especially right here at Beth Jacob. But you know, it came to me in 2 words: Lador Vador. Marvin builds mishpacha bridges across communities that invite Jews from wherever they are to participate and enrich their Jewish experience across interest groups, across generations. He's in it for the long haul, the past, the present, and the future. Marvin has invested his time, funds, and heart to a host of causes ranging from building programs as past president at the JCC, United Jewish Fund and Council of St. Paul, JCRC-ADL of Minnesota and the Dakotas, and so many other organizations, building up the arts, endowing programming and education across organizations, including Beth Jacob, and it's made a huge difference right here, right now. And these investments will touch this community for generations. Case in point, check out the stunning Roman glass collection that's on display right to your left as you enter the shul by the office. Another gift from Marvin to you, the Beth Jacob community. I first met Marvin some 30 years ago when we joined the shul. He has an uncanny insight into human nature, the civil law, the Torah, and the depths of our Jewish sources and traditions. And he is deadly funny. Quick retorts, commentary, and a phenomenal support for those experiencing crises. I'm proud to say he is my role model of how to live a deeply meaningful Jewish life personally and in community. If you don't know Marvin, get to. It'll change your life for the good. Thank you, Marvin, and may we go from strength to strength, Lador Vador.
That was beautiful. In Pirkei Avot, Hillel says, "Do not separate yourself from the community." Bob and Linda Perry never separated themselves from the community. They put themselves right in the middle of it and lovingly invited all of us to join them. Linda's superpower is noticing and knowing immediately when a new person walks into the room, when someone needs someone to sit with, when the kitchen needs an extra hand, or the fundraiser needs an incredible volunteer, or someone just needs a friendly hello. Whether in her role as Kesher Committee member or just being Linda, within minutes she will have introduced herself, know your entire life story, invite you to dinner. It is not possible to feel outside of community when Linda is around. Bob has the same superpower, just expressed in a different way. Let us not forget that Bob was president of the shul 2 times. I cannot even imagine how many meetings he went to and how many decisions he helped make. Bob also made millions, and I mean millions, of calls to find Torah readers. But these were not just calls. These were relationship building and bringing others into the circle. He knew your favorite reading. He knew whether you wanted a short one or a long one. He knew if it was going to be your bar mitzvah or bat mitzvah. He knew if it was going to be your first time reading, whether you loved chocolate, and always wanted to know how you were. And if by chance he got the wife of the Torah reader, remember, it was landlines, on the phone, Bob wanted to know how she was, what she was up to, and before asking for Sarah Lynn, the Torah reader, he always asked how she was. Thank you, Linda and Bob, for helping all of us not separate from community, to feel embraced by it and embraced by community and you.
Shabbat Shalom. Ze hayom asa Hashem nagila v'nismecha bo. God made this day. Let's celebrate and be joyful on it. V'zot hakihila nat'u Larry and Sue. Nagila v'nismecha ba. And Larry and Sue planted this congregation. Let's celebrate and be grateful in it. Sue and Larry Sept were here at the beginning, with Larry serving as our first president. They both were central in the process of bringing together a disparate group of founding members to jointly shape the development of Beth Jacob. Sue, a devoted social worker, and Larry, a gifted physician, along with their children, John and Ellen, were already active members of the St. Paul Jewish community and its institutions. But they aspired to more. They envisioned a diverse congregation in which every person was equally received, in which everyone's particular gifts were valued and welcomed. And beyond envisioning it, they, along with other key members of our community, have inspired it, and they've built it.
As our congregation bravely engaged the challenges posed by a commitment to a truly egalitarian shul, Larry brought his gifts to the process. Gifts of joy, optimism, humor, and listening skills. He brought a physician's skill of asking important questions such as, what can we learn from this? How can Torah guide us in these difficult decisions? And then he truly listened carefully to the responses he received. He led in ways and continues to lead in ways that nurtured our shul's values of commitment to Shabbat and deep learning, worship, and acts of loving kindness, and was integral to the effort that brought Rabbi Allen to Beth Jacob. And Sue? Well, Sue just knew what to do. From the start, Sue knew what a shul community should feel like and what it would need. She modeled and helped build a kind of personal hospitality in all sorts of ways, including organizing the preparation and delivery of meals of chesed, storing the first freezer for those meals in their garage. And who knew? Who knew that this process of working together to reach out to one another when we were in need was key to building those strong bonds of loving fellowship that continue to this day? Yes, a congregation where everyone's gifts were valued and welcomed. Larry and Sue, we thank you for all this and much more.
So when Rev Ellen and I spoke about having this installation today to plan for it, she told me that these 5 people were chosen because they are really builders of the shul. And in thinking about a bracha or a teaching that we could conclude our installation ceremony with today, it occurred to me that given that we're doing this also today with the start of Limudim, what stood out to me was the teaching that we find in our Siddur on page 204. If you'll turn to page 204, and then you'll be ready for In Kelohenu anyway. The teaching says, Rabbi Elazar said in the name of Rabbi Hanina, students of Torah increase peace in the world. As the prophet Isaiah said, all your children shall be taught by Adonai, and your children shall increase peace. The word children is banaich, but they say not to read the word as banaich, your children, but rather as bonaich, your builders. And I'd just like to suggest that both our banaich and our bonaich are what increase peace in the world, and we are so grateful for both. May those who love your Torah find great peace. May they not stumble. May there be peace within your walls, tranquility in your citadels. For the sake of my brothers, sisters, and friends, pray for peace in your midst. For the sake of the house of Adonai, I seek your welfare. May God grant strength to God's people. May God grant God's people peace. Amen. After services, the panel will be formally installed, put up at the back of the social hall, or maybe that's the front of the social hall, I don't know, by the dessert table, so you can spend some time there and nosh on something sweet. We are so grateful to Rabbi Allen, Dr. Phyllis Gorin, Susan and Mickey Minzberg, Jeff and Barb Skochel, Riv Ellen Prell and Stephen Foldis, and Stuart Bear and Marcia Schenken for sponsoring Kiddush today in honor of the oral history unveiling, and to the Beth Jacob Board and Limudim Task Force for sponsoring Kiddush in honor of the start of Limudim, our learning community. Thank you so much. We want to introduce guests and visitors, so if there are people who are visiting or here for the first time, could you please stand up and introduce yourselves so we can get to know you?